The following program is brought to you by the University of Alabama.
Translating the text for the catalog of ships of the French line inspired Dana Gynther to place her first novel, Crossing on the Paris, on an ocean liner. She tells the stories of three women, strangers, who share the adventure of a transatlantic voyage. Recently, her love of all things Parisian has resulted in the novel The Woman in the Photograph, the fictionalization of the life of beautiful model and accomplished photographer Lee Miller. In the 1930s, Miller became the mistress, the muse, then protege turned collaborator of Man Ray, avant-garde photographer of Montparnasse. I spoke with Dana Gynther in our studio in Reese Pfeiffer Hall on the campus of the University of Alabama. Dana, it's nice to see you.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I would say welcome to Alabama, but you know your way around Tuscaloosa. You know your way around Alabama. You were raised in this state partly.
That's right. I came here when I was 10. We moved to Auburn because my dad got a job at the university there. He's a professor. And then I chose to go to school here. Wasn't a football question, but I just wanted to see something new, meet new people, have a different experience.
Campus kids, my own, in fact,
right.
Like you, when they were seniors in high school, they said, "Oh, Dad, please no.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend the next 4 years here in
Anywhere
town."
but Alabama. Yeah.
And so they went off, as you did. You went across the state to the arch enemy, but it meant nothing.
Right.
The football stuff.
Well, the football, I never cared for football, so I was just wanting a different scene.
Right. And your father taught psychology.
That's right.
Did you come here to study psychology?
I thought I would, and so I didn't want to study under the people who had been in and out of my parents' house for years, all the dinner parties and such.
Yeah.
And when I got here, I realized I had to take some kind of heavy-duty math, and so I immediately abandoned the idea and studied other things, political science, French. So.
At some point, did you take a summer in France, or was it a semester or a summer?
I went on a summer program led
Right.
by a great French professor named Emmett Parker, and which was for me really life-changing because up to then I just had a kind of a French minor. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and that really was eye-opening. I loved Europe, I loved France, I loved the language, the food, everything.
And Emmett could do it too.
He could.
Emmett knew how to introduce a person to France.
Well, he took me to his favorite bistro, he bought me my first glass of Pernod. Even though I didn't like it, I liked being with him, and we had a great time.
Yeah, and so you chose at that point to take an MA. You, in between time, you went back to am I right about this?
I was an au pair in France.
You graduated from here, moved to France, lived there 18 months, something like that?
Right, almost 2 years, and then I came back to get the master's here.
When you took the master's degree, was it in 20th century? Did you think of yourself as, I know masters are just the one year, so to speak, but
well, it was about two and a half.
30 or 36 hours.
Right.
And did you think of yourself as specializing? Were you a 20th century person mostly?
I did. I did my thesis on Marguerite Duras, who was a 20th century writer, a woman writer.
You must have studied with Alice then.
I did. She was my thesis director.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then what?
And then I started teaching French at Tuscaloosa Academy, and then I married a Spanish person who could speak French, and we moved back to his hometown.
In Spain?
Which is Valencia, Spain, and so we've been living there ever since.
That sounds like good duty to me. You've been there 20 years.
Right, a little over.
Is that right? And if this were a kind of world events, contemporary, what's going on show, I'd ask you 10 questions about what's going on in Spain. And we may touch on that anyway. But you had to earn a living of a sort in Spain. You had to do something, and I understand that some of it was translation.
Right, obviously I wasn't going to be a French teacher over in Spain. That would have been ridiculous. So I taught a lot of English. I still do. I'm still an English teacher over there too. Now Spaniards are obsessed with learning English, so I have plenty of customers. And we also do translation. My husband is the main translator, but he would farm out jobs for me if he had too much work, which has not been the case since the economic crisis hit. In fact, his main clients had been museums and all the different catalogs and all of that stuff.
Catalogs, brochures.
And as we know, culture is the first to go when you have an economic problem.
Oh, don't tell me it's true in Spain and France too. That would be very discouraging.
So,
a book that's referred to, a book of yours, that's referred to in all the publicity material that I've seen about you, says that you did. It may have been a catalog about French luxury liners.
Right.
So you came to know a good deal about French luxury liners. I love the idea of that's a wonderful phrase.
Yeah.
French luxury liner.
Right.
The food must be great, etc.
Yeah, well, in first class. Yeah, there's a big difference. And when we talk about luxury liners, we have to remember the class disparities because, well, it wasn't so bad in steerage as it had been, but still it wasn't as posh. So yeah, that book was a museum catalog called Giants of the Atlantic. And so I translated several articles for it and became really, really interested in that world. And one of the most interesting things was the class difference and how we all imagine first class, but none of us, well, we rarely imagine the kind of bourgeois scene in second class, which is probably a little duller, and then third class and some of the just lack of ventilation and that kind of thing.
I confess I have trouble imagining first class.
Oh, you've seen the Titanic movie.
I imagine second class much easier.
Yeah.
And I don't want to imagine steerage anyway.
Right.
But you had a long interest in things that are French. You had this project where you learned a hell of a lot about ocean liners. And then your first published book becomes Crossing on to Paris, a novel set on the maiden voyage of a French ocean liner.
Right.
And that's where you got to explore first class, second class steerage.
Yeah.
When I read your novel, I thought, I always think this, I mean, it's just grooved in my head, but if a book takes place on a ship, it's all got to be Ship of Fools. It's got to be Catherine Ann Porter in some way. But so is the Decameron, in its own different way. But here you had this little world with these three women, one in first class, one in second class, and one in, let's say, third class.
Well, they were called floating cities. And they had, in fact, the first class was a smaller group, as they would be.
Yeah.
And steerage is the largest. And you have many more passengers, the double, the triple in steerage than you would in the other classes. And yeah.
But they're not locked down there when the ship sinks, really, are they?
Well, of course my ship doesn't sink because that doesn't always happen, but they weren't allowed to explore the ship. They were supposed to stay in their quarters. Right.
You're three women. I mean, we can't reproduce the novel, but the older rich lady who's in first class, she's coming to the end of her days. And then the young woman I was more interested in
Julie?
Julie, yes, who'd lost all her brothers in the First World War.
Right.
She was trying to make a new life. And,
right.
Yeah. What was she headed for in America?
Well, I think growing up in Le Havre, she had always imagined these ships to be wonderful places. And then when she got on one, actually working there, it was drudgery, it was maid work, it was, servant class stuff. And she got seasick, and it just wasn't what she'd imagined it to be. No. And so she was inspired then to maybe leave the ship and just stay in New York and immigrate.
Oh, she's going to do that.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, I never
Yes.
doubted it for a second.
Right.
The minute she sets foot on the dock in New
Right.
York, she's going to just
Bolt. Yeah.
disappear, as millions and millions of people have.
Mm-hmm.
The woman in first class is rich, and she's lived in Paris
30 odd
for
years.
years.
Mm-hmm.
They're all French, and two of them have just been in Paris. But the older woman is coming to the end of time. She's not going to last long, is
Right. No. Where was what I wanted to say about that period, 1921, is when the action takes place. Is it's a post-war period, and like you say, Julie has lost her brothers, but you have all this kind of grieving, international grieving going on.
Yeah.
And so the elderly woman is also going through a process of kind of mourning her youth and kind of assessing her life and trying to discover exactly if she had regrets and what they were.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, she had a good life. Her flashbacks
Are the best,
delightful.
yeah.
She's had lovers. She's had wonderful parties, wonderful trips, vacations, and so on. She's had a good time. The woman, the almost middle-aged woman.
Yeah, middle age. She's 30, right?
She seems older,
Right.
but the woman in second class, she interested me in a way the most because she's the woman of the three. Well, I suppose Julie is going to start a new life, but she's had almost no life, and she's going
Right.
to start a life in the new world.
No, she's American, actually. Constance, the second class character, is American.
No, I mean Julie's
she's-
the one who's going to
oh,
start
yeah,
a new
yeah,
life.
yeah.
But Constance, the woman in second class, she's married. She's been in Paris for just a, what was it, 2 weeks
Yeah,
or
2
something.
weeks.
But she is a restless soul, and she's discontented with her husband that she's
Right.
going back to. What do you think Constance is going to do? Constance going to run off with the ship's doctor?
No. I think she had
No.
her moment, and she made the choice of family. And and I think that maybe a woman now would definitely decide that she'd had it, she wanted something new. But I was trying to place the women in their time, and a woman back then, especially solidly middle class and all
Yeah.
that, I think she would have chosen family.
Well, it's a little bit sad because I
Right.
liked the ship's doctor.
Oh, I did too.
I thought
I did too.
he was a very attractive soul, and she might have been happy with him. But she can't run off from her.
But also, she
children.
didn't necessarily trust him. She didn't know if he was really single and maybe a philanderer.
And he was French.
And he was French,
And
so
who-
how are you going to know?
Who could tell? The book is held together. You're going to watch this for a segue. You're really going to like this one. The crossing on the Paris is held together by a photograph taken as the three women are going aboard. And there are three women in the photograph. And then darned if you don't publish another book called The Woman in the Photograph.
That's true.
In which case you have Lee Miller, who was a distinguished, she's a very distinguished creature for one thing,
Right,
but also a photographer.
Well,
Lee
I was just
Miller's
talking.
not so well known now, but she certainly was more famous in the 20s and 30s.
Right. She was a celebrity, in fact.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say is, Constance, I was telling you, she's a woman of her time.
Yeah.
Whereas, of course, Lee was living at the same time and had a string of lovers and smoked and swore and drank heavily and the whole bit. So a woman of your time, I don't know what that means. So.
Well, Lee was 22 when your novel opens.
Right.
And she did not have a husband and two children.
That's true.
We could cut her a lot
We can cut her
more
some slack,
than poor old Constance. Lee, what you have, we were talking earlier about, really not just about the novel Z, which is about Zelda, but there have been a lot of novels just in the last 4 or 5 years,
Yeah.
which are fictionalizations in some sort of Fitzgerald's life, Zelda's life, Hemingway's
Of
life.
course.
I mean, these are now people, everybody in the street knows who they are now, thanks to Woody Allen, I believe.
There's part of that. Definitely, that was a very popular film. But as far as publishings go, I think it just goes back to 2011 with The Paris Wife.
Yes.
And that was so huge.
Yes.
That all the other publishing companies wanted that success.
Yeah.
And,
they're chasing it.
Yeah.
And they're getting it. I mean, I suppose.
Right. In fact, when I was in New York talking to them about Crossing on the Paris, I was told they had a book in mind for me. And that was this book. They wanted me to write about Lee Miller.
Good.
And so it was a conflict for me because I like inventing characters. I like pure fiction.
Right.
And then when I read about Lee, I thought, yes, this is a person I can deal with.
Well, she's exotic.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with every word. The minor distinction I was going to make was that you have some advantage in that some people, as you were saying earlier, perhaps the English know her better, probably because of her World War II reporting from the Blitz.
She lived in
and
England
so on.
through the Blitz to the end of her life.
Yeah.
She never really came back to the States.
But we're not burdened when you produce a character based on Lee Miller. You're not trapped by your reader's knowledge in the way that the person who produced Z,
Right.
or other, when you write when your historical novel has famous people in it, and everybody knows how it turns out.
Right.
You're really stuck. Lee Miller was raised in the Hudson Valley in Poughkeepsie, and apparently the most beautiful woman alive.
Right. That's the
time.
reputation she had.
Yeah, amazing. But also meant to be an artist, meant to be a photographer. She goes to Paris after some career in New York and a little bit of mentoring by Edward Steichen.
Right. When she was his model in New York City, she would ask him, she wanted to see his tricks. And he would show her a few things in the dark room, but she didn't really know at that time what she wanted to do. And she had had many ideas. She thought she wanted to be a screenwriter or a chorus line dancer or this or that. And she was a restless person. And she was in art school. She went to the Art Students League in New York City. And it was just too slow. And photography was something fast enough for her and technical. Her dad was an engineer, and she always felt like she had that same tinker's soul that her dad had.
Well, she liked the dark room. She didn't. She
Right,
liked,
the
she
technical
didn't only
aspect.
like the studio.
Right.
She liked the, as you say, the technical aspects. But when she gets to Paris, she decides. I was reading along, and I thought, this is a willful creature. This
Right.
Lee Miller. Man Ray is going to be her mentor, whether
Right.
he knows it or not.
He didn't have a chance, as you said in your review. Yeah.
He is just had. And then she makes him so unhappy.
Well, I think he's possessive. It's kind of a contradiction because the surrealists didn't believe in monogamy, they didn't believe in marriage, they didn't believe in all of these things, and yet he wanted her exclusively for him, and she wasn't having any of it.
No.
Yeah.
Do you, thinking about, since my first time through Woman in the Photograph, thought about her some more. She was rambunctious. She was not just unfaithful. She was really liberated. She
Right.
did exactly as she pleased on a daily basis. This is not a dichotomy. It doesn't have to be either or. But she was sexually abused as a child, and she is sexually, promiscuous is an ugly word,
Right.
liberated as an adult woman. Do you make that connection?
Well, the biographers I've read made the connection that her parents were very enlightened in many ways. I mean, they were the first in the town of Poughkeepsie to ski, or they were the first to have electric blankets, and they had all these eccentricities. But they took her to a Freudian psychologist in New York City. I think someone quite famous, I don't remember who. And that person made it clear to her that love and sex were two separate things. And that seems a lesson she learned well. That I think she was free with her body, and she, in fact, when her son was born, she felt like it was kind of over. That was in 47 or something like that, and she said, if I had to live it over again, I would be even freer with my body, my life, I guess she probably had some postpartum depression or what have you.
I don't see how she could have been much freer
Right.
and not been utterly exhausted.
But I think she did have difficulties loving, and I tried to make that clear, that when she's in the relationship with man and he loves her so much, that she can't get it. She doesn't get it. She has a hard time understanding that intensity of love.
It is. It's a distinction that men imagine themselves to be making between love and sex. For women, even in the roaring 20s,
well, yeah, the
it was
flappers.
still much more of a combination.
Well, the flappers were known to be kind of free in that way.
Yeah, yeah. He was famous.
Right.
He's not. I mean, this minute, he's still more famous than Lee Miller
Much
in
more,
America.
much more.
But neither one of them is a household word. I mean, if you went chanting Man Ray's name up and down the streets of Tuscaloosa, you would get very little response. But he was maybe the most famous cutting-edge photographer of his time. He had Kiki, the the model.
Well, that was his first Parisian girlfriend. They were
Right.
together for 6 years, and she starred in all of his experimental films. And for me, the photos of Kiki are probably the most iconic.
The violin.
The violin.
What is that? That photo has a real name,
Yes,
not the
it
violin.
does.
Is it Clef or something?
No, it's don't ask me.
Never mind. It's her back, and it's made to look like the cutout opening in the face
of the F holes of the violin.
of a violin, and she's sort of she's not in the picture when Lee Miller arrives, but
almost. She's still on her way out, kind of, and very jealous. And
Lee Miller helps her out the rest of the way. That scene, you have these cameos, Breton and Picasso, and the whole the surrealist world. But the one that of this supporting cast, the one who has the largest part is Cocteau.
Yes.
And she appears in a film of his.
The Blood of a Poet.
Was she an actress?
No, and I've seen that film now many times. As you can imagine, it's a 20-odd minute film, and I've seen her sections a lot, and you can see she is a bit wooden, and she does look a little insecure, a little nervous in that role as actress. And she never wanted to act again after that. She had done some plays as a child. She had danced. Right. That kind of thing, but she wasn't a born actress, that's for sure. I think in her day-to-day life, perhaps she was.
Oh, well.
You know, when she would go to the bar and be a witty charmer and have flocks of people around her, that's when she was acting, and she felt probably more comfortable.
Well, she was a performer.
Right.
for sure.
Right.
It is one of the things that happens in the section of your novel that has to do with the film, is that she learns how much work it is, how hard it is,
Right.
how tired it makes you at the end of
Right.
the day. She thought she was just going to kind of swan around, I think.
Well, I also think that you realize as an actor that it's the director who's the creative one. And she felt maybe like she was just being a model again.
Yeah. We refer to Crossing on the Paris as your first novel, and then The Woman in the Photograph as your second. I know that you've written another one,
Right.
but there also was an unpublished first one.
True.
So the first one and the fourth one are in the future.
Hopefully.
Can you?
Hopefully.
Can you? We only have a couple minutes left. Can you talk about those?
Well, the first one is a multi-epic novel. It's a history professor from the University of Alabama who goes to Valencia, where I live, and becomes fascinated with a monument. And then we get these 3 flashbacks from the different parts of that monument's history, where we get these detailed stories of different times. And I love that book, and I very much want to see it out there in the world.
Good.
It's called The Admiral's Baths, because the monument in question was a 14th century bathhouse. And it still exists. You can still visit it.
14th century.
Right. It was built in 1313.
So it's Moorish.
No, it was
not Roman.
No, it was after the Christians had reconquered Valencia, but it's in the Moorish style. And that bathhouse was open for business until 1959.
Oh.
So my father-in-law actually bathed there when he was a college student.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right. And number 4.
Number 4 is a contemporary novel with contemporary characters, and it's not historical, which makes my agent nervous. So we'll see how that goes.
Contemporary as in right this red hot minute?
It was funny. I was writing about Thanksgiving during Thanksgiving last year. But it's about a man, and it's a boy meets girl story where they discover that each one of them has a very dark moment in their past. And the dark moment of the man is actually based on my father's story, because when he was young and naive, he got married kind of quickly, and that marriage kind of deteriorated and wasn't very nice, and and they got separated, and she disappeared from the face of the earth, and they never saw her again. And so
a lot of paperwork in that.
Well, that's an intense thing. It's a haunting thing. Yeah. And so.
And that's the other one we have to look forward to.
Right.
Well, I really enjoyed this. This has been a great pleasure.
For me as well.
And I hope that when your new novel comes out and you come back across the Atlantic Ocean to promote it a little bit, you'll come back here and we'll speak again.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.